You're braver than you believe, and stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think.
Oh, that's easy.
It's about Dr. Ernest Holmes, the founder of this thing we call the science of mind. And he gave a sermon one day that, and he talked in this sermon a lot about some of the traditional ideas that a lot of people believe very strongly in and spend a lot of time with, heaven and hell and the devil and all of that. And he talked about sin. Sin was prominent in his talk. And afterwards, when he was standing in the line greeting people, after the service, they were passing through, a woman came up to him that he recognized because she'd been there quite often. And she said, "Oh, Dr. Holmes, I didn't know what sin was until I met you." Isn't that wonderful? And supposedly that really happened. Now, there's another little story. There was a man that overheard another person talking to a woman or went up to a woman and he says, "You know, you look like Helen Green." And she says, "Well, you ought to see me in pink." Hell in green, or Helen Green. And we see the confusion that can arise as a result of some of the things we say. And not only that, the interesting thing is the interpretation that other people will put on them. And you ask, well, what does this have to do with the theme of what I'm going to be speaking about here today, which is the mental equivalent and the law of attraction? And they really pretty much mean the same thing. Well, what it has to do with is that we do interpret according to what our own mental framework is. And we take it and twist them around and make things that people say fit what we would like to hear or want to support some belief. And in a political season like this, we can see that very evident every day that we turn on the radio or the television or pick up a publication. And that's what it has to do with. What it has to do with is the idea of a mental atmosphere, that we do create a mental atmosphere. And we talk about the mental equivalent as a term that you'll see pop up here and there. A lot of people say, well, what is the mental equivalent? Well, it is the net result of the law of attraction. Or to put it another way, what you embody in mind, what you accept into your consciousness, or this atmosphere that we call it, this mental atmosphere, is what's going to project itself into your experience. And you can create a thought pattern that is equivalent of something that is going to express. Or to put it another way, you can look at something in your life and say, I wonder what the mental equivalent was behind that. Now, it's not so easy to tie these things together in every possible incident or instance. However, I think you get the idea. You know, there was a wonderful statement that was made. I don't know when it was made, because it is attributed to a man of the pre-Egyptian history, ancient Egypt, if you will, by the name of Hermes. Hermes Trismegistus. Some of you may have heard of him. Hermes Trismegistus means the thrice honored one, or the thrice great. And scholars have argued for years over three what. And they can't quite agree, but they've come up with a number of different things that he's supposed to be great about, or that characterize him about. Doesn't matter. That's how he's referred to. And in one of the books that was written about him a little over 100 years ago, called The Kybalion, there's a statement that many of you have heard this, because it comes out of a lot of ancient Egyptian writings. And it goes, as above, so below, as above. Now, does that sound familiar to you? Have you heard anything like that, maybe out of your tradition? Like, and on earth as it is in heaven? See, it's the same idea. Or to put it in terms of Hermes' statement, if it indeed come from Hermes, it's in heaven as it is on earth as it is in heaven. As above, so below, as above. We're talking about a consciousness. The elevated consciousness, the heavenly consciousness, the above consciousness is going to replicate itself in the earth level, the material level. And anything that you can observe on the material level is a projection or expression of that at the higher level of consciousness. This is kind of interesting. This is telling us that our life is a function of our consciousness. And this is what this business of the law of attraction is all about. This business of the mental equivalent, creating, if you will, in your own imagination, in your own consciousness, a spiritual prototype, if you will, or a spiritual prototype. I guess that's as best I can say it right now without having to think of other synonyms. But I think you get the idea. Things are of like nature are attracted to each other. And interesting, Hermes, by the way, talks about the 7 laws of Hermetic philosophy, and one of them is the law of polarity. And you can have a polarity associated with almost anything. So like in magnetism, you have the polarity where there's a like nature of the energetic fields of the opposite ends of magnets. You bring a couple of them together with opposite ends and bam-o, they really attract. But you turn them around and they repel. It's the same principle that we're talking about. Attraction and repulsion. The interesting thing is if our mental attitude is one of negativity, somehow or another, there's a positive attraction for more negative in our life. We attract to us what we are in consciousness. Our thoughts, our beliefs, our patterns, our hopes, our dreams, they establish the mental attractive field, the patterns of our whole life. And we are going to experience pretty much as that consciousness is. Our mental atmosphere, the sum total of all of those qualities that I've just talked about there, establish our personal intention for life. Now, some people will look at this, and some of you may look at it and say, well, yeah, you say that kind of stuff, and I look at my life, and it's in a state that I don't particularly like. That was not what I intended. No, it may not be what you consciously intended or intend right now, but somehow we have a tendency to condition our minds out of fear, out of doubt, out of negative circumstances, out of greed, out of expectation, out of mass suggestion. Sometimes we tend to bring into our mental field all of these things, not even knowing that we are doing it, but simply because they're what's happening around us, and we kind of accept them because we don't question. And when that happens, we find that it's going to open us to an experience that is going to be basically according to our mental atmosphere. Your mental field, this mental atmosphere, is really the subconscious state of your thought, and that decides your conscious experience of life. It's a statement of the basic principle of cause and effect, the law of cause and effect, or the law of attraction, if you will. And it is not only definite, but it is exact. Now, that doesn't mean to say you might get what's in your consciousness. You're going to get what's in your consciousness. It doesn't mean to say that you might get something you don't want. You're going to get what's in that particular level of consciousness. It is your mental equivalent. And somehow or another, that mental equivalent becomes acceptable to you. It's not whether you understand this principle or not that's going to determine how it's going to work in your life. Like the old saying goes, ignorance is no excuse. Ignorance does not allow you to violate the basic principle. You know, we are told one of the statements of the, I call it that primary idea a little while ago, is that our subconscious state of mind, our mental subconscious state is going to attract to us or going to decide what the experience is of our life. Another statement of that is one that you see in the Psalms, where it says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. As we embody at that level of emotional acceptance, or acceptability may be a better way of putting it, is what is going to be reflected in our life. That's one of those statements. And the principle, as I say, is exact. We are going to get accordingly. Now, Ernest Holmes made this wonderful comment. I like this. He said, we can do nothing, we can do more. This is it. That's the words. We can do more towards saving the world by proving this principle than all the charity has ever been given to it. Think about that. And why is that so? And we propound charity and giving and openness and flow and all that. And I talk about this, and I really believe in that. But if we could really embody this principle that we're talking about, that our subconscious atmosphere is going to attract into our experience exactly according to what those patterns are, to what those mental equivalents are that we create in this universal prototypical type of universe, or the prototypes within the universal mind, if you will. He's saying if we can really understand that, then what it does is it opens us more and more to being able to experience direct inspiration through the spiritual essence within which we all live, move, and have our being. And that is far more powerful than anything that we are going to give to try to overcome some negative situation. Because in that atmosphere, we really include other people. And because there is one mind, the mind of God, and the mind of each one of us is an element, a part, a portion, an expression of it. Our own personal mental fields overlap with those of others, and they resonate and attract into them others like it, creating even a greater resonance. So, you know, a number of years ago, it just popped into my mind. When I first got into the ministry, there was a project going on. I can't remember where it started. I think it started through the EST program. Any of you remember EST? Erhard Training Seminars? Oh, yes. It later transformed various ways, and is in the forum now. Very good stuff. But I remember they had a program going on called the Hunger Project. Do you remember that? No, you probably don't. But it was a hunger project. This has to be over 30 years ago. I became aware of this hunger project, and I thought, what's the point in this? And then it dawned on me, because people would give a certain amount of money, and the amount of money wasn't even paying for the organizational expenses for the project. But they kept bringing it in and enrolling more people and more people and more people all around the world. And then it dawned on me, the money has nothing to do with it. It's the consciousness, building of consciousness among people that created such an attractive force that more and more were brought into this, that flowed right into that awareness. And indeed, I know that they had some very, very positive effects as a result of it. And there was no real money exchange except to promote the hunger project. So sometimes it's not all throwing your money away to contribute to a political campaign, is it? You might want to argue that. Yeah, we can do more towards saving the world by proving this principle by anything else. You know, and when we talk about this, implicit in that, proving this principle, implicit within that, and everything that I've said up to this point, must be a method. We must have some idea of how we can do this. how do we bring our consciousness around to the point of being able to focus our attention in such a manner that we transform from one that repels the good of life, or another way, you could say, attracts the negative of life, to one that is going to attract the positive things in life. And I want to talk a little bit about that in wrapping this up this morning. I want to talk about a method for developing a healthy, useful mental atmosphere. And you know, this is interesting because almost every week I like to give a little bit of background and give a few examples and typical oratorical techniques that I never took courses in this, but they seem to work a little bit. At least they convince me. But I always talk about pretty much the same thing, and I always come up with a few things that you can do. And you say, well, which one should I use? I have an answer for that. I don't know. Or I could say, any of them that appeal to you and seem to work for you, because I'm really saying the same thing, coming at it from different viewpoints. So this morning, you're going to get 4 ideas, 4 ideas, or 4 principles, 4 steps for building a healthy, useful mental attitude. And I want to start by putting these up here, and I'll discuss each one of them. Develop a healthy, useful, and productive mental atmosphere. Number 1, be definite and consistent. Recognize that the law is impersonal. Number 2, stay flexible. Don't limit the law. 3rd, take action. And in so doing, you're going to reinforce your intention. And finally, be open to your own inner guidance, to the inspiration that is there, to this field of intelligence and inspiration within which you live and move and have your being. So let's look at this first one just a little bit. Be definite and consistent. Recognize that the law is impersonal. You see, so very often, we encounter people who talk about what they don't like in life, what's bothering them in life, what they abhor or hate, and they never get around to replacing those kinds of thoughts, those kinds of mental patterns with ones that embrace what it is they really want, that is consistent with expressing what's in them to be contributed to the life process. So be consistent and be definite. Know where you're going. If you know where you're going, at the very least, there's a chance of getting there, because you know which way to point yourself, which road to take. And believe me, when you can become really, really clear on this, you're going to find opportunities open in front of you and all around of you to lead you there. And the consistency part is really, really important. Now, I know a lot of you people will come up and you'll say things like, yeah, but I remember Oscar Wilde said that consistency is the last refuge of the ineffective, or something like that. I don't believe that. Or it may be, if you're just consistently following the same dumb, stupid track that you have for a long time, it'll take you right down the rat hole. On the other hand, Earl Nightingale, who some of you know, made the comment that consistency is the flywheel of civilization. And what he's talking about here is a flywheel has momentum. And once you start it spinning, it takes a while, all of the resistances that it's going to take in order to slow it down. And once you get it going, it's going to carry you forth. There are all kinds of comments about it. I believe that when you set your sights on what it is you want, determine yourself to be consistent with that. And if you change your mind, that's okay. Maybe setting your sights, becoming clear, becoming definite, is going to illuminate better for you the various factors that have to be considered, and you may need to change your mind about what you're doing, but you shift with a new definiteness of purpose. Does that make sense to you? You know, we all know this. I don't have to tell you that. But sometimes you need to be reminded. What I'm saying, of course, is sometimes I need to be reminded. A lot of times I need to be reminded. Let's look at the second one here. Stay flexible. Don't limit the law. When I say that, don't limit the law and staying flexible. Be willing to open yourself to the realization that there is a solution for you. A lot of people start out, they don't have that flexibility. They know where they're wanting to go. They know where they would like to be. They have no idea how to get there. And as a result of having no idea how to get there, they are going to throw all kinds of blockages in their way rather than taking some steps that maybe lead in that direction. There's a story that I want to tell you about a man named Harold Sherman. And those of you that have been around these metaphysical teachings for very long may have heard of Harold Sherman. He's gone now, but he was a well-known teacher of these what's referred to truth ideas for many, many years. And he wrote quite a number of books. And in one of his books, he tells an account from his own life where he had been very successfully writing a lot of books and speaking in a lot of places and doing a lot of personal interactive processes with important people. He was doing very well, and then he began to develop a condition of the throat. And it was called mycosis or something mycosis, and you medical types might know something more about that here. But the doctors prescribed various things. They worked with him and they had seen this before, and they were not able to do anything for him. Finally, he went back to his GP, his general practitioner or family physician, whatever they call them now, and he did some things that helped slow it down and give him some relief, but finally told him, there's nothing in the world that I can do for this. He says, it looks like it's just a progressive disease, and we just don't know what to do. Nobody seems to. There was nothing in the literature. The experts couldn't help him. So he began to do his prayer work, directing his prayer work in the same technique we call spiritual mind treatment or affirmative prayer, and letting it go and trying to adopt an attitude that would be receptive to something new that could help him. One day, he attended a lecture, and this was a physician, minister, missionary who had just returned after many years from Africa, where he worked with some of the people in the remote villages. And he listened to this lecture, and the guy was very inspirational. It was nice. And after the lecture was over, he went next door, grabbed a cup of coffee and a sandwich or something to eat. And lo and behold, the lecturer walks into the door of this little restaurant, and he was all by himself. And Harold Sherman looked at him and introduced himself and invited him to sit down at the table with him. So the man came over, they started talking, and Harold Sherman obviously was having difficulty with his throat. He says, sounds like you've got a problem there. And he talked about it and told him what it was diagnosed at, and he says, oh, I can take care of that. You could take care of this? Well, to make a long story short, he did. When he was working in a particular village for all those years, this was a prevalent condition there, and they tried everything, and they didn't have modern medicine, and one of the constituents in a mixture that was used to coat the throat was creosote. And they used it on the people there, and they were able to cure them. I don't know what else was in it, and the nodules dropped off, and all of the people in that village got well from it. Harold Sherman got well from it, and he lived to a ripe old age after that. Now, is this just a coincidence that on the billions of people on the face of the earth, half a world away from where this originally occurred, Harold Sherman and this missionary happened to show up in the same spot and go to the same restaurant and both be alone so they could be together? Maybe it is coincident. Wow, what a coincidence. But these kinds of things happen, folks. This is what the law of attraction, I think, is about. This is what creating the mental atmosphere for the possibilities and the opportunities that life holds for you is all about. And it's really simple. Be definite and consistent about what you want. Don't limit the principle by what you think you know is possible. That is, be flexible. The responsibility for setting in motion this lawful process is ours. And we do that by the establishment of our own mental attitude, our mental atmosphere. The responsibility for making it work, getting a demonstration, a positive demonstration of what it is we are looking for, is not ours. It's intrinsic within this universal principle that is God expressing as the impersonal law that can only respond to us according to what we ask of it or what we can conceptualize, see within it. Believe and accept. Really, really important. Create the picture in your mind. Then step into the picture and feel what that's like to have achieved that. And then accept it, let go, and trust. The third step in this process of developing a healthy, useful mental atmosphere and productive. I added that as a last moment because I think that's important. Take action that reinforces your new mental state. It reinforces your intention to take action. You've heard me say numerous times, you take one step forward and you can see one step farther than you've ever seen before. I love that statement. And out of the Tao Te Ching, you have the statement that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. But if you don't take that first step, you're not reinforcing your intention. As a result, what you may see or what you may encourage to show up in your life simply by this intention of yours being expressed through a positive action to do something is going to encourage new information, new insight, and encouragement to proceed in a particular direction. I had the opportunity to meet a woman named Leo Russell a number of years ago. I don't know if you've ever heard of Walter Russell. Walter Russell is one of the really great American mystics, and he died back in 1960, and I didn't even know he had existed until later in the 60s. And I was on a contract review back at NASA. I had a contract to do some work for NASA. And back in Langley, Virginia is where their headquarters is. And I went back there with a friend of mine from Norfolk, right in the area. And I said, I want to go visit this place called Waynesboro, or Swannanoa in Waynesboro. Swannanoa is up on a hill, and it's in the city of Waynesboro, Virginia. And it's a beautiful mansion up there that Walter Russell, this mystic, American mystic, used to live in. And he's noted for a lot of them. We have a little book in our bookstore called The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. There's a lot of things written about him, but that little booklet is an inspiration in itself. And that's what stimulated me to want to go there. I had read that little book. And when I went there, not realizing it, but Walter Russell's wife was still alive, Leo Russell. She wrote a book that sums up in the title by itself a whole principle. And that principle is, it deals with this business of taking action. God can do through you. God can do for you only what God can do through you. It's become a common phrase now in these kinds of teachings. God can do for you only what God can do through you. Isn't that wonderful? That implies the power of taking some action, of moving positively forward. Let's look at the last one here. Be open to your inner guidance. When you rigidly try to force something to happen, you coerce the system, you push and cajole, get all into this, what you are really doing or may be doing is impeding the process because you are acknowledging, you are creating more of a consciousness that you don't have it. You have to work hard. You have to push, and it's going to push back, and it's going to be more difficult than ever, but you're going to do it anyway. Now, I believe in persistence, and I believe in working hard, and I believe in doing all of those kinds of things, but not out of a field of compulsivity, which I have been so apt to do in the past, to try to make something happen. Do everything that you know to do and then let go. Keep yourself open to that inner guidance, that inner something. Otherwise, you might be conditioning your mind to get feedback of what you want to hear, only to support your rigid position. Does that make sense to you? You know what I'm saying? And we do that all the time. The human mind is a very funny thing. The human mind, I call the conditioned human subjective field of mentality within us, oftentimes will do anything to support its position. You know, you hate something, and yet you've accepted it so fully that strange things go on. And what this is this subconscious state of your thought that decides your experience of life. And when you resist in that way, oftentimes you're apt to miss the greater message that's trying to get through to you. So if I were to summarize everything that I have said here this morning so far, to wrap this up, this primary idea, the idea that as one thinks at this heart level, at this emotional level, so you are going to experience in your life. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That's the primary idea. Secondly, I think it's very important, and we haven't talked directly about this, but it's been in everything I've said here. We can develop a consciousness for the good of life. And third, remember these 4 steps. Be definite and consistent. Be flexible. Don't limit the law. Take action. And keep yourself open to your inner guidance. Let's have a little time together to seal these ideas. Know that we live and move and have our being within this field of limitlessness, within this expansive, infinite field of possibilities and opportunities, of joy and love and goodness, of intelligence and creativity. This is the mental field of the universe itself, within which each of us lives, functions, has his or her existence. Wow. And I'm not all of that. But all I am is my expression of that. I can draw upon that, anything into my life that is necessary for me to fulfill the basic pattern design, divine design of my being in this life experience. And I'm here for a reason, as is everyone, everywhere. So I open myself to that. I clearly formulate in my mind the ideal of experience of life that I desire, that I feel, that I'm urged to move toward. I turn it over totally to this impersonal principle backed by the very personal love of God, and allow that law, that impersonal principle, to take it and act upon it according to my own belief, and my belief grows and expands. And then I grow and grow in the willingness to do what I know needs to be done. And having done all that I can, I turn the rest over and depend on this inner guidance. And my life is transformed. My life is transformed, as is the life of everyone here. As we move in this direction, we know that we have opened ourselves right now to the healing balm of spirit. Every aspect is smoothed over. Everything in our physical, our mental, and our emotional being is harmonized. So therefore, healing occurs where healing needs to occur. I am so grateful for this. I accept it as so, and together we seal this by saying, and so it is.